In the previous episode, Jean had made a comment about Jia gaining weight, which had irritated her. She retorted, "Wait, who were you talking to?" Jean seemed a bit confused and responded, "What do you mean, who?" "Of course, I'm talking about Rat." He picked up their cat and continued, "He wasn't this heavy before. Is it because the weather is cold these days?" Jia laughed and replied, "Well, aren't animals like that? Animals that live in cold regions tend to gain weight. Rat might be that kind of animal, the kind that gets fatter when preparing for winter." Jean somewhat agreed with Jia's explanation and asked, "Should I maybe raise the room temperature?" The following morning, Jia was caught secretly observing Jean from behind a wall. Jean inquired about what was going on, and Jia responded nonchalantly, "It's nothing." As he was leaving, Jia waved her hand and wished him well, saying, "Be careful on the way." Jean, somewhat hesitantly, waved back and replied, "I'll be back." This gesture by Jean took Jia by surprise and made her somewhat happy. However, the reality behind Rat's weight gain was different from what Jean had believed. Jean had set up an automatic cat food dispenser to ensure Rat had proper meals. But in recent days, Jia had been giving Rat extra treats, including handshakes and hugs. She pondered on this while considering her own habits, realizing that she had been using a food delivery app too frequently. She thought that she might also gain some weight and decided to weigh herself. However, upon stepping onto the scale and seeing the reading, she laughed and exclaimed, of course, people don't get fat that easily. Mincheol must be really busy these days, to leave a broken scale like this." Jia decided to try on some of her old clothes to see if they still fit her. She was delighted to find that they still fit perfectly. However, while she was bowing down to pick up something, she heard the sound of fabric tearing. In the evening when Jean returned home, Jia had one of his special vegetable drinks and asked him to teach her how to work out. Jean was elated and held Jia's hand, saying, "You've made the right decision, Jia. At our age, exercise is a must to stay healthy. So, when shall we start?" Jia felt irritated by Jin's sudden physical contact. But, at this point in the story, it's important to remember two things about Mincheol. First, he's a health-conscious individual who even chews on chicken breast during holidays, and second, it's nearly impossible for an office worker to visit the gym regularly unless they're truly passionate about exercising. After an exhausting workout session with Jean, he approached Jia and advised her, "Jia, wake up, you need to work on your lower body too." On a particularly bright day, Jean and Jia found themselves sitting on the beach, enjoying the sun's warmth and the sound of the waves. It was an idyllic setting, but Jia had something on her mind. She turned to Jean and asked, "Jean Mincheol, have you heard the news? There's an asteroid that they originally thought would miss Earth, but now it's predicted to hit. Tonight might be the last night for humanity. What should we do? How can mankind make their last night meaningful?" Jean, with a warm smile, responded in his usual composed manner, "Why are you asking something so obvious? Let's just lie down." But then, abruptly, Jia woke up with a start. She was disoriented and still felt the warmth of the dream in her heart. She couldn't help but wonder why she was having such a dream. Her stomach growled loudly, breaking the remnants of her reverie, and she lay back down on her bed. As Jia lay there, her thoughts drifted to the recent changes in her life. Since she had sought Jin's help with her exercise routine, her mornings had become rather strenuous. His constant instructions made every morning feel like a personal battle. After their workout sessions, she'd sit down at the dining table, irritated by the tasteless food she had to consume. She contemplated her weight and decided to check it on the scale, only to be met with speechless surprise when she saw that the numbers remained the same. At the gym, Jean introduced a new exercise, one that he claimed could significantly improve Jia's health in just 3 minutes. The exercise in question was the plank, and Jia was far from ready to believe she could become fit in a mere 3 minutes. Planks, as she soon discovered, were core exercises that seemed to slow time itself. After the workout, she felt as though she'd met her end, and the cause of her demise was a relentless 60-second plank for 3 sets and an exhausting 1,800-second aerobic session. As she observed Jin's workout, Jia marveled at his strength and determination. He was lifting around 160 kilograms of weights, a feat she considered far beyond what the average person could achieve. Upon completing his set, a beautiful young woman approached Jean and asked, "Are you perhaps a trainer?" Jean responded, "No, I'm not." The girl laughed and complimented him, saying, "You were so polite and professional when coaching, so I assumed you were a trainer. This is my first time at the gym, and if you don't mind, could you show me how to use the exercise equipment?" Jean calmly agreed, and Jia watched, becoming increasingly irritated. Jean moved from one machine to another, demonstrating their use and offering helpful tips. Jia's irritation continued to mount as the beautiful girl interacted with her husband. The girl then pointed at an exercise called squats, which she had seen on the internet, and asked Jean to demonstrate it. As Jia observed this open flirting, her anger grew, and she couldn't understand why Jean was indulging the girl to this extent. Suddenly, the girl lost her balance while trying to stand up. Jia felt like a dark villain as she seethed with frustration. But she had to remind herself that her relationship with Mincheol was merely on paper, and they had agreed not to interfere with each other's business or private lives. It would be better to maintain that agreement. Just as she was about to leave and pretend she knew nothing, a loud sound caught her attention. Turning to look, she saw Jean gently removing the girl's hand from his arm and saying, "I'm sorry, but I'm a married man." Then, with a loving smile, he turned and walked over to Jia, placing his hands on her shoulders, introducing her to the girl by saying, "And this is my wife." At this point, Jia turned bright red, feeling a rush of emotions she hadn't expected. The atmosphere in the gym suddenly shifted, and laughter filled the air. Jean found himself holding Jia before a curious onlooker. The young woman appeared somewhat bewildered, not knowing how to react in the unexpected situation. Gathering her courage, she finally mustered the question, "Married?" Jean responded with a composed expression, "Yes, I am a married man, and this is my wife." "Oh, just so you know, I'm not particularly fond of fried tofu. I'm the kind of person who has a wife." Upon hearing Jin's words, the girl couldn't help but smile, her cheeks blushing with a hint of shyness. She commented, "You should have told me in advance that you were married." Jean, ever the straightforward speaker, replied, "You didn't ask." The girl, slightly embarrassed, bowed and excused herself, retreating from the scene. Jean, realizing the awkwardness of the situation, turned to Jia and suggested they leave the gym. However, when they reached the elevator, they discovered it was out of order, leaving them with no choice but to take the stairs. As they descended the stairs, Jia couldn't help but feel her face flush with embarrassment. She was acutely aware of the attention they had received, especially when Jean referred to her as his wife. It had been a profoundly awkward moment. Sitting down in the midst of their descent, Jia's discomfort was evident. Jean, showing concern, asked if her legs were hurting and if she wanted a piggyback ride. Irritated by the offer, Jia declining his help. Observing the exchange, Jia couldn't help but wonder how Jean had become so popular among women. She asked him, "Does that sort of thing happen often?" Jean, perplexed, inquired, "What thing?" Jia clarified, "The situation where women ask you to teach them about something." Jean sighed, "Ah, that kind of thing. It does happen occasionally. But you know what's strange? After the initial enthusiasm, they usually invite me to cafes or bars, as if they're more interested in that." Jean shared his observations about the gym, noting that while women occasionally asked him for workout tips, they usually ended up inviting him to cafes or bars afterward. Puzzled, he questioned the point of working out if they planned to indulge in such activities. Jia, with a playful yet amused thought, envisioned someone might win Jin's affections with a protein shake. Jean went on to express his bewilderment at the fact that these women disappeared from the gym after just 3 days. Silently, Jia mused to herself, "You are the problem," recognizing that Jin's obliviousness to their intentions might have driven them away. Amused and exhausted, Jia couldn't help but wonder how anyone could keep up with Jin's eccentric habits, like taking the stairs after a rigorous workout due to the broken elevator. Despite her initial frustration, she found herself somewhat relieved, as she had grown fond of Jin's unique quirks. However, her relief was short-lived as her legs began to tremble from the intense workout. Feeling that she might collapse if she continued at this pace, she contemplated her own demise. But then, while walking home together, Jia noticed something different about Jean. He was smiling more broadly than she had ever seen him before. Intrigued by his unusually cheerful demeanor, she couldn't resist asking, "Did something good happen? Why are you smiling like that?" Jin's response, given with a heartwarming grin, took her by surprise. He revealed that he was genuinely happy about working out with her, emphasizing that having a workout partner brought him more joy than he had anticipated. He elaborated on the satisfaction of sweating together, which he believed made the experience even better. This revelation touched Jia, and despite her exhaustion, she felt a sense of warmth. Yet, when Jean mentioned that they would continue their workouts together, she couldn't help but wonder if she had unintentionally committed herself to more intense exercise sessions with Mincheol, which both amused and worried her. Nonetheless, she decided to keep her concerns to herself, sharing in Jin's happiness and the newfound bond they were forming over their shared workouts. It was the morning of the second day of their intense workout routine, and Jia was feeling anything but refreshed. Exhausted and contemplating the meaning of life, she questioned why she had subjected herself to such grueling sessions. To make matters worse, Jin suggested Jia that she should go for a walk, claiming it would help alleviate muscle pain. Jia couldn't quite fathom the idea of an early morning walk, but she reluctantly agreed, willing to give it a shot. As Jia strolled along, she began to understand the wisdom behind Jin's suggestion. The gentle movement helped ease her aching muscles, and as she picked up the pace, she could feel herself breaking into a light sweat. This unexpected turn had her thinking that perhaps, at the rate she was sweating, she might just reach her desired weight sooner than anticipated. However, her newfound momentum was interrupted when she crossed paths with a mysterious man wearing a hoodie. They briefly exchanged glances but continued walking in opposite directions. Out of the blue, the man called out Jia's name, sending a shock of surprise through her. She couldn't fathom how this stranger knew her name, and so, she abruptly stopped and turned around to see who had addressed her. The man revealed his face by removing the hoodie's cap, and his familiarity only added to Jia's astonishment. With a friendly smile, he inquired, "You are Jia, right? Long time no see." Upon hearing her name, Jia immediately kicked into high gear, running as fast as her legs could carry her. The mysterious man in the hoodie was in hot pursuit, matching her pace. The chase continued until the man's stamina gave out, and he gasped for breath, uttering, "I am tired. I am dying at this rate." Jia, now ahead, glanced back and called out, "You can just stop following me." But the man remained determined, shouting for her to halt. After a while, both Jia and the man were exhausted and had no choice but to stop. It became evident that their diminished stamina was due to their shared habit as smokers. The man took out an inhaler, revealing that he also suffered from asthma. Lying on the ground, he remarked, "You are playing hard to get, huh? Okay then, just go and live well." Jia politely bowed and replied, "Yes, sir, then I'll excuse myself." However, the man, whose name was Na Yongduk, wasn't about to let Jia leave so easily. He called after her, "Hey, you gotta stick around at a time like this. Cut me some slack." As a gesture of goodwill or perhaps mere persistence, he handed her his business card, which, to his amusement, featured a practical ruler function. The card piqued Jia's curiosity, and she commented, "I don't think it's scaled properly." Na Yongduk grinned and said, "Oh, you noticed. I put the wrong scale on purpose." Jia couldn't help but ask, "You did it on purpose? Why?" She was baffled by his unconventional approach. It seemed that Na Yongduk was not just any ordinary individual, as he revealed himself to be a former producer. He continued to jest, "Isn't this also a form of marketing? You asked me right away why the scale is wrong." Jia wondered what was going on with this peculiar man. Na Yongduk pointed at her and stated, "You must be thinking, what's wrong with this idiot, right? Then you thought about it one more time. Well, that means I have succeeded. It's also a success in marketing." Frustrated by the encounter, Jia stood up with the intention of discarding the business card. However, Na Yongduk intervened, exclaiming, Jia, this is a park, you can't just throw trash here." He persisted in their conversation, asking, "So, by the way, what are you doing these days? Still writing?" Jia couldn't help but display her annoyance and retorted, "Oh," suddenly coming to the point, "are we starting an insult battle?" Na Yongduk, with a more serious tone, offered an apology. "Well, when a writer and a producer meet, it's a regular greeting. Don't get mad. About what happened that time, I am sorry, and I felt sorry that time too." Jia remained silent, her thoughts swirling in the uncomfortable silence. Suddenly, Na Yongduk received a message on his phone that caught him by surprise. He exclaimed, "Oh, what the heck, the meeting is not tomorrow but today." He hastily got up and told Jia, "Anyway, it's nice to meet you. If we get another chance to meet, let's get something to eat. Call me." Jia didn't respond, merely glaring at him with annoyance. After he left, she was left feeling a little sad. She looked at the crumpled business card in her hand and muttered, "Call him? Does he think I'm crazy to call him?" On that evening, as Jia and Jin sat down at the dining table, the atmosphere was slightly tense. Jia, however, had a cheerful smile on her face, and she began eating her dinner with a sense of peace. Jin, on the other hand, appeared somewhat flustered. After gathering his courage, he finally spoke up, "Jia, well, it doesn't really matter to me what you eat or how you eat, but should you really be eating like that?" Jin's comment alluded to Jia's attire, which was a bit fancier than usual, and her unusual choice of a wine glass filled with a chicken breast shake. Jia responded calmly, I am just trying to feel good. It doesn't matter as long as I eat what I usually eat. Jin, clearly unsure about Jia's eccentric eating habits, commented, well, the way you eat is a bit abnormal. Jia, feeling a hint of annoyance, retorted, do you think it's normal to grind chicken breast in a blender? And the vegetables that I eat every day, I am just trying to make myself better, and you're not happy with that. Jin, taken aback, merely said, it's not that, and fell silent for the remainder of dinner. Jia attempted to lighten the mood by pretending to be a bit crazy, hoping it would improve her own spirits. However, her antics only seemed to bother Mincheol, who was sitting across from her. Jia's irritation grew, and she couldn't help but wonder why she kept getting entangled with people from her past, such as Choi and now producer Na Yang. All these thoughts left her feeling increasingly annoyed. Suddenly, a knock on the door interrupted. Jin stood up, calling Jia outside. Feeling fatigued from the day's events, Jia opened the door, expecting something mundane. To her astonishment, she was met with the sight of Jin Mincheol, who had transformed himself into a Michael Jackson look-alike, asking her, how about a dance? She stood there, bewildered, and took a moment before finally breaking into a smile. With a hint of amusement, she responded to Jin, no, thank you, as if she had just declined a polite offer. Jin, however, wasn't ready to let her off the hook so easily. He prevented her from closing the door, inviting her to stay and talk. They both took a seat on the sofa, but an awkward silence hung between them, making the atmosphere somewhat uncomfortable. Jia, breaking the silence, attempted to make sense of the situation. So, Mincheol, she began, to sum it up, you thought the crazy things I did today were because I was upset. Okay, you didn't like my strange behavior, so you're basically saying that you want to make me feel better, right? But why did you choose to dance? Jin replied, well, that's what they do in the movies. Jia teasingly retorted, the movies? What kind of movies have you been watching? Jin, with a hint of embarrassment, confessed, Bollywood films. Come to think of it, those guys are always dancing. When the mood is heavy, they dance. They even dance in the middle of a battle. While Jin's reasoning was unusual, Jia couldn't help but acknowledge the truth in his words. The music that he had turned on in the background had an oddly infectious quality, and she found herself nodding along. Jin continued, also, when we were younger, you used to tell me something. When you do it alone, it's weird, but if you do it together, it's fun. If you're going to act weird anyways, it's better to enjoy it together, don't you think? Suddenly, Jia burst into laughter, catching Jin off guard. He asked, Jia, why are you laughing so suddenly? Jia managed to calm her laughter and explained, well, it's because I really shouldn't be laughing right now. She then stopped laughing and continued, you are right. If I'm going to act weird, I'd rather enjoy it together. I used to say that. Mincheol, I just thought of something better than dancing. Do you want to do it? Amused by the suggestive remark, Jin chuckled. They decided to go out for pork belly and soju, a classic combination in Korean dining. The unexpected food choice puzzled Jin, but Jia was determined to enjoy her cheat day. She encouraged Jin to embrace the moment, telling him that he wasn't allowed to be sad on a day when she was having fun. While enjoying their meal, Jin suggested an alternative to dancing, mentioning the delightful experience of lighting a candle and slicing the meat. Jia, puzzled by this idea, exclaimed, what candle nonsense are you going on about? Charcoal fire is where the real taste is at. Woo, look at that fire. It's so fun cutting the meat myself. If heaven is a place, this is it. Also, isn't it boring going to a luxurious restaurant in nice clothes like this? Cooking pork belly with these lavish outfits feels more fun and mysterious. Jin, trying to keep up with Jia's enthusiasm, conceded that their unconventional choice made them appear mysterious. Jia then picked up a cabbage leaf and held it out to Jin. She instructed, what I truly find fun is this. Now open wide. Confused by her sudden request, Jin asked, out of the blue. Without waiting for a response, Jia playfully and mischievously shoved the cabbage leaf into Jin's mouth. Their unique dinner adventure continued as they enjoyed a memorable evening together. It was an experience unlike any other, and it seemed like their day had no bounds in terms of delightful surprises. After dinner, they decided to visit a karaoke establishment. Jia couldn't help but feel like she was living in a dream. The day had been filled with laughter and unforgettable moments, all thanks to Jin. The sheer joy of having someone to share these experiences with was overwhelming for her. Jia had always been someone who felt self-conscious, especially after experiencing a great day. However, her inner turmoil was now challenged by the contentment and happiness she had experienced. Jin turned to Jia and remarked, "Playing like kids is certainly fun, don't you think, Jia?" Jia's heart swelled with gratitude and affection. She knew that she needed to express her feelings, despite her embarrassment. Turning to Jin with a soft smile, she said, "Hey, Mincheol, thanks." A hint of shyness colored her cheeks as she continued, "Thanks for being here with me today." Jin, surprised by her sudden expression of gratitude, was quick to respond with concern. "What happened all of a sudden? Jia, are you hurt anywhere?" "Well, there's a saying that if people do things they don't usually do, it means they're going to die." Jia reassured him and explained, "I'm going to kill you, and whatever you say, I prefer expressing my feelings in the moment. If you don't want to hear it, plug your ears or something." She smiled warmly, her eyes glistening, and continued, "Thanks for today. You thought about me a lot, and what happened today, I'll make sure to repay you when I can." Jin, deeply moved by her words, attempted to respond. However, Jia stopped him mid-sentence, saying, "That's it for today. You're not allowed to ask me anything now." "I'm too embarrassed to respond." As Jia attempted to avoid any further discussion, Jin couldn't hold back his own emotions. He took her hand and pulled her closer. In that moment, he found the courage to speak his mind. "Why do you always cut me off? I have something to tell you." Jia, feeling a mix of anticipation and anxiety, asked, "What is it?" Jin remained silent, his hand gently cupping her chin as he drew her closer. Jia's heart raced, and she wondered if this was the right time for what might come next.